Good afternoon, Leila. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Super, thank you. And we are here with Dr. Leila Daneshmandi, and I'm so excited that you're here for our conversation today. And
Likewise.
and I'm actually sitting in the UMass Lowell Innovation Hub today, as you can see by the banner behind me. But we're both have this affinity to the University of Connecticut, right? I mean, we're both
Yeah,
Huskies, which is pretty cool.
yeah, two
Yeah.
back-to-back national championships. So we're
It's
proud
an
of that here.
It's an exciting time to be a Husky, no doubt, if you're into college basketball, even just a little bit, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, no,
absolutely.
it's very exciting. And I saw a statistic, I think it was yesterday or the day before, about like how the class of 2024 is like over 8,000 this year, which is just a, a crazy number. Because I can tell you, when I
Wow.
went to UConn, our class sizes were not anywhere near 8,000, right? So it's
Yeah, yeah.
very, very exciting. So cool. Well, thanks again for taking some time to chat with me today. I really am excited to get into so much that you have done as it pertains to entrepreneurship, your educational path. I obviously mentioned that we're both part of UConn. You've got so many interesting components of your journey and your company Encapsulate. So I'm excited to talk about all those things. So maybe just a quick 2 or 3 minute overview of who you are for the audience might be a great way to get us started.
Yeah, yeah, likewise. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah.
So I am the co-founder and chief operating officer of Encapsulate. It's a
Hmm.
medtech startup in cancer therapy in Farmington, Connecticut. And I'm also an assistant professor in innovation entrepreneurship, specifically
Hmm.
in the College of Engineering at UConn. My background's all been engineering training. So I
Mm.
have a PhD in biomedical engineering. I did my undergrad in biomedical engineering. I graduated from UConn from the PhD program. And I also did a master's in global entrepreneurship in between. So I think we'll talk more about what led
Yeah.
me into entrepreneurship, but I've kind of been at the borderline of engineering entrepreneurship and then now education a little bit as well.
I love that. Part of one of the organizations that I'm deeply involved with here at UMass Lowell is an organization called the Difference Makers, and it
Mm-hmm.
is an interdisciplinary education approach to taking students who are interested in entrepreneurship across the entire university and bringing them together. So you'll bring together engineering students who are interested in entrepreneurship, business, fine arts and science, health, and allow them to kind of work on problems together interdisciplinary. Yeah, so so the education kids and the engineering kids and the healthcare kids and the business
Mm-hmm.
kids are all kind of like having that shared experience, if you will, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you've got a pretty extensive background in biomedical engineering, as you just mentioned, and in entrepreneurship. Can we talk a little bit about your educational journey and how it's kind of shaping your approach to entrepreneurship? And I think particularly in healthcare, since
Mm-hmm.
Encapsulate is a cancer
Mm-hmm.
research startup.
Yeah, yeah. I love the approach of interdisciplinary education.
Mm,
So I always was trained as a biomedical engineering. My parents are both university professors. I've
mhm.
always been in the academic environment. I remember as a kid, my parents were doing their PhDs, and we lived in England. So I'm just that's what
That's
I
pretty cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I grew up and I'm what I'm used to. So when I entered biomedical engineering, I loved it because I obviously enjoy problem solving. I figured
Yeah.
that out early on and
Right.
how that relates to solving problems of the human health in whatever
Mm,
capacity that could be. That was the initial draw to biomedical engineering.
mhm.
Um, and so I knew that I wanted to do a PhD because, the field is very much in depth. So I wanted to get more
Right. You
education
need
in
that
that. Yeah.
specific education, specific
Yeah.
training, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So early on, I remember a person gave me this great advice in undergrad to try to diversify, the areas that you know about in biomedical, which was great. As an undergrad, I didn't really focus much on one specific area. I would
Sure.
do projects here and there. And I think that helped me once I got into the PhD program. I kind of carried that mindset. So even though I had a main dissertation, much like other graduate students, I also was involved in collaborations with other universities and professors and
Oh, very
PIs.
cool.
So that really helped me. And that was very, very much what I I was driven towards. I enjoyed it. I really liked that research aspect.
Sure.
And I guess I kind of accidentally fell into entrepreneurship. I took a course on technology, innovation, entrepreneurship. I remember specifically someone told me it's a cool course, you should take it.
Right.
And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, why not? And so in that course, we were asked to develop a idea around an existing healthcare or any problem in particular, but because my background was in biomedical engineering, I
Sure.
just looked into
That's what you were
healthcare. And
drawn
so,
to. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so, one thing led to another when we started with this idea, and then we talked to a couple of physicians and in hospitals, and that's kind of where this, tick for entrepreneurship was born, I would say. And it just continued, like from that course with my co-founder, we would pitch the idea, we would get feedback. I want to emphasize not all of it was positive, but still we got a lot of feedback and excitement, and it just helped us grow, from a classroom project to a
To a full-blown
university
company.
side, to a
Yeah.
full-blown company now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And in terms of, you and I both just kind of talked a little bit about interdisciplinary education and
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurship and how academia can provide sort of opportunities for budding entrepreneurs. How do
Mm-hmm.
you integrate
Mm-hmm.
those into your teaching as an assistant
Mm-hmm.
professor of innovation and entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So when I started my job at UConn, there's that existential question of, can you even teach entrepreneurship? How
Right,
can you
right,
train folks to
right.
become entrepreneurs? There's so much debate about this as well, right? So I read a lot. I looked at tons of videos from people that are well known, and I think essentially it boils down to that problem solving, solution seeking mindset, which
Yeah.
is great because the population I work with are engineers, business students. I have students from digital media design. So I try to incorporate that mindset in them.
Mhm.
Even if you do not pursue a career in entrepreneurship, is what I say, you can still develop the entrepreneurial mindset. So if you see a
Right.
problem, would you think about a couple of different ways to
Ways to
solve
solve
that
it. Sure,
problem? And
sure.
then if, it is a viable solution, then you could further pursue it as well. And perhaps it could become a company. But I think where I'm coming from is very much everyone can become empowered to have that mindset of, being an entrepreneurial individual in whatever job or career that they end up in.
I think that's an important distinction, right, Leila, is that entrepreneurship is not contained to you have to have a startup,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Yeah.
And a lot of the women that we talk to on the show are not founders of companies, but they are extraordinarily entrepreneurial in
Mm-hmm.
their approach to how they are solving the problem that they want to solve,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That's so
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Encapsulate. So, Encapsulate, you're working on cancer precision diagnostics, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
can you tell us a little bit more about Encapsulate, maybe its journey, what it's been like co-founding this startup?
Yeah, absolutely. So Encapsulate develops, what we do is we develop automated tumor on a chip systems.
Mhm,
We can take a cancer patient's cells from the initial biopsy when they're first diagnosed with cancer. We can
mhm.
take a portion of the biopsy, grow it in our biochips, and then test all the possible chemotherapy drugs
Wow.
and determine which one's the most effective for the patient on a personalized basis.
And is that by line, by tumor, by stage? Can you get like
Yeah.
that precise in it, Leila? Yeah.
Yeah. So any type of solid tumor really that
Sure.
has a biopsy. So some solid tumors won't, have biopsies done, but
Sure.
any solid tumor that has a biopsy, we're able to take a portion of that and do the screening on
Mm,
different types of drug combinations and concentrations.
mm,
Right now, we've done two pilot clinical studies, retrospective studies with
sure.
patients from 5 to 10 years ago that we knew their clinical outcomes, that was known to us, and we were blind to the results. We grew it in our chips and we saw correlation with what we see and what had happened clinically to the patient. And
Interesting.
so that's the point where we're moving forward to do a prospective study to now see in real time how we can assess that. That's where the company is at. We're a seed stage startup.
Mhm.
That's the stage that we mentioned. And we're a med tech startup. So, just sectors and industries that define the startup space. And Yeah, so I mean, I was involved from the day that it was an idea in our head to when it's actually now a full lab that, we
Sure.
actually run tests in, and we have a research scientist and we all work together. Um, it's been an incredible journey.
Yeah.
I think, part of what makes the startup world exciting, and I was thinking about this, is there's just so much that's unknown in the space
Yeah.
that you're, working in. You're creating a new market essentially. And so I think for me personally, I really enjoy just figuring stuff out. Like at the end of the day, I really enjoy understanding and learning
Mm.
and building strategy around that. Over time, I've grown more in the business aspects. So I'm very comfortable building strategy, talking to people, getting feedback, talking, partnerships and business deals and all of that. It changes throughout, time. Initially you're more in R&D stages, and then over time you become more oriented in terms of business operations, people management, and all of that.
It's a journey, right? Right,
Yeah.
because like you said, you're spending so much time figuring out the science aspects of this and what you
Hmm.
can do and the tremendous promise that is held within precision medicine and personalized medicine. And it sounds
Yeah.
like you're doing some amazing things there. But then, oh yeah, we're trying to build and scale a company around the science, which in and of itself has its own
Yeah.
challenges, has its own unique sort of do's and don'ts, right?
Yeah.
So, is
Yeah.
there anything in particular that has struck you as part of that process, Leila?
Yeah, I think you said it. So prioritizing what you should focus on
Mm,
any given day, and also in the long term, just to make sure that you're not, stuck into the day to day, is a challenge itself.
mm,
I'm a first time founder. Obviously, I don't
sure.
have much experience in growing and building and scaling. So those aspects are tough, and I think everyone, it's kind of, I'm like a broken record, but it takes a village for
It does.
entrepreneur,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It's so true. And it's so important to surround yourself with people to take feedback from. And then on
Mm,
the flip side, something that I mentioned, it's kind of hard to not get lost as well, because as an
yeah.
entrepreneur, you're trained to just take so much input and feedback from
Right.
everyone.
Everything. Yep.
Right, and you have to stay humble because you're learning.
Mm, mm-hmm.
So there's also points that you have to finally make a decision, right? It comes down to what decision you're going to make. So I just want to add that side note that it's very critical to take feedback from everyone that you can, as much as you can, but also at the end of the day, you are the one that's running the company.
You
It's
have
on
to
your
make a
shoulders.
decision. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so
Yeah.
there's only so much collaboration you can do, and to your point, yes, you're humble and you're learning, and but at the end of the day, a decision will have to be made, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
and people do. I know when I joined startups, the reason why I was part of startups was because I was able to make decisions. And I would say to
Hmm.
people, "Oh, I make more decisions in a single day or a single week than some organizations make in a quarter, or even longer than a quarter, like a
Hmm.
year, because they're
Yeah.
lost in committee, or they're lost in, and so there's good and bad with that, of course.
Yeah.
um, as you know, a big part of this show, or the arc of this show, is we really like to talk about women in this space.
Hmm.
And not to embarrass you, but I'm going to read some of your greatest hits here. So you were
No.
a Connecticut Woman of Innovation finalist. You were a recipient of the Outstanding Senior Woman Academic Achievement Award. You have had recognitions from the National Science Foundation, from so many different types of accolades. Can we talk a little bit about the challenges you have felt as a woman in the field of engineering and in
Hmm.
entrepreneurship, and what have you done to try to overcome some of those? I mean, I'm sure it's a
Yeah.
constant challenge, but what are some of
Yeah.
the ways that you have found some success, Leila?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that. So I was at an event yesterday
Mm,
for CEOs and entrepreneurship, and when I walked in the room, I would say maybe out of a room of 50 people, only five were women.
sure.
And so
And you're
those
also
rooms.
you're on the younger side too, right? On
Yeah,
top of that.
yes,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
also a thing I
yeah.
think I personally struggle with. But yes, ageism. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, you do step into those rooms, and it happens quite often.
Mm,
Unfortunately, I can't tell you. the best way to approach it. For me, I just, I can't think of a better way to say this, but I suck it up and I just, do what I have to do. So I will go and speak and I will network. And I am aware that maybe I am one of the only few in the rooms, but I would say having allies in the space doesn't necessarily come down to gender. I've, seen so many incredible, people, men also, that will support you and understand where you're coming from. And so they'll offer you more advice. And so they are aware of, the fact that there are, those lines that exist. Personally, I would say in my role at UConn, just taking from the experience that I've had to deal with, I can be more vulnerable and open with the students. So I think I've, read about this as well. So I will talk about some of the experiences that I go through, because these students, if I am training them to become
They
entrepreneurs,
need
I
to
want,
hear this.
both sides also. It's not just, the women in the class, everyone.
Sure.
They need to know the reality outside of the university and what exists. So I think there's ways that you could take those vulnerabilities and just the insecurities and turn them around. One of the pivotal experiences that I went through, and I'll mention this because it may be interesting for some of the listeners, is I went through a program where it was exclusively for women founders, and I had never done anything like that before. This was last year. And I wasn't really sure what I was getting myself into. I just thought it would be similar to any other program. And it did offer a lot of what other programs offer, but then it had this sense of community building, in a sense that I just was able to really connect to the other women, and everyone in the room was able to connect to each other. And we really offered each other genuine, authentic feedback on how we perform as, founders of our companies. And I think that's maybe something that really helped me, one of the pivotal moments. And I would, recommend this. If you find peers in your space, try to at least have a couple that are closer to you. And so you can more easily bounce feedback and talk about, oh, I'm struggling with this. Is the tone of my voice the right projection for pitching? And someone will tell you, oh, maybe, your tone isn't the best, but you have a certain, let's say, calmness that when you speak, it just brings across confidence. Or so you can get feedback in a way from peers in all different aspects.
How did you come across this particular program, Leila?
Just going through other programs and hearing of this. So
Yeah.
someone
So
recommended it
kind of
to me
organically.
organically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, if you want to get, into certain spaces, and if you are interested in exploring, it could be whatever, right? Try to find those events. If there's newsletters you could subscribe to, LinkedIn pages that you could follow, because they'll share events and happenings, and they're more than happy to welcome, new and upcoming folks to the room. And that's a great way to learn more and connect with people. And then you never know what opportunities could come out of it.
Right. And it gets you out there, right? Out and
Yeah.
about. And like you
Yeah.
said, you don't know what the follow-on opportunities are. And I appreciate too what you just said about how it is a learning experience. And like you said, the pitching and getting coached around pitching and those things. And I think it's extraordinary that you're able to take some of those key principles or those key philosophies and emphasize them to your students. And like you say, be vulnerable and safe and have those kinds of conversations about, look, because succeeding in the tech startup world, especially the health tech this is not easy, right?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
not an easy thing to do. There's
Yeah.
a lot of big opportunities, but there's a lot of really big challenges, whether it be regulatory or cost or who's going to pay for this, right?
Exactly.
The federal government may be involved if there's things that you have to do, again, beyond regulatory. So there's a lot there, right?
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
people to kind of try to think through.
Exactly.
You kind of talked a little bit about this a second ago, Leila, but so the advice that you're kind of giving to aspiring entrepreneurs, you said certainly, LinkedIn and joining groups and attending things. Are there other sort of critical pieces of advice that you have given to young professionals kind of launching into the tech startup world today?
Yeah. I mean, if you are still in school, consider taking a course in entrepreneurship. Or I think pretty much most universities have programs in entrepreneurship, whether it's a center, an institute. So go to those events, get involved. And aside from that, there are skills that you could, work on and develop over time that will help you also in your entrepreneurship journey, right? So
Sure.
communication, public speaking, being comfortable to go network, talk to people that you don't know. Those are all important. I think one of the ones in the course that I teach that I think really helps the students over time is team building and team working just together with people from different disciplines. So,
Yeah, kind of we talked about at the beginning,
yeah,
right?
right. Yeah. So a mandate that I have, and I don't have a lot of mandates for my course, but the one that I have is that if you are an engineer and everyone in your team is an engineer, you're on the wrong team. If
Right.
you look around and everyone looks like you're on the wrong team.
You're on the wrong team. I agree.
Yeah,
Yep.
I want you to work with people outside of your field, because no matter what job you end up in, that's going to likely happen.
Oh gosh,
And so,
absolutely.
yeah, right. So those trainings are important personally that you could work on, and then building your network and getting exposed. And, just if you are intrigued by something, just go after it, learn about it, read about it, or talk to someone about it. And usually, if you ask people for 10 or 15 minutes of their time,
They'll give it to you.
they will. It's
Yep.
very unlikely that they'll say no. So ask for just 10, 15 minutes and just do a brainstorming session with the person.
Such a great point, and I think one that people do forget sometimes, right? I did go to a conference at Harvard back in the fall. It was a conference specifically centered around young women finding an inroad into the venture capital world. Because look, I don't need to tell you that venture capital is not investing in women-founded, women-led organizations, right? It's like 3% of venture capital funding is going that way. And one of the pieces of advice that one of the speakers gave was just try to ask that person for 10 or 15 minutes of their time. And don't be afraid to do, number one, don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
Right. And number two, you're 9 out of 10 times, or maybe even 9.5 out of 10 times, they're going to give you that 10 or 15 minutes. They're happy to do it. And you never know unless you ask. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
That's the spirit. That's the spirit itself of entrepreneurship. Just go for it.
Go for it, right? Absolutely. Send that cold email, make that reach out on LinkedIn, go to that conference and have the courage to walk up to that person at the end of the conference and say, hey, my name is Richard and I saw you speak, or whatever. Like, and I would just love to pick your brain about this thing. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So cool. If you see circles of people talking, just go up and say, do you mind if I join you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
just,
yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So, we mentioned at the beginning, you said you're back home and everything. You're a busy person. You balance multiple roles. You're a professor. You're a founder and chief operating officer of a biotech startup. You're on boards. You're an entrepreneur. How do you do it, Leila? How do you manage these diverse commitments effectively?
I don't know. But also, all of them somehow are where I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
So that really does make a difference.
So it doesn't maybe feel as much like work, right?
Yeah, I do enjoy those aspects. If I teach after the class, I usually have more energy. Just, it's areas that I really like. And I think one thing over time, and this is, with age, I really enjoy diversifying the pieces of that my identity that I can explore. I would rather much, do multiple tasks than have one task. And that's just something that works for me, right? Over time, you'll just see what works for you better. I just see that that's what helps me in, my professional, personal journey.
Yeah. And do you have other outlets, Leila, that you get into as well to help try to give you some sense of recharge or grounding?
Yeah. So when I started to teach entrepreneurship 3 years ago, I was talking about prototyping and I was thinking, I don't think I've ever built something with my hands. I am an engineer and I worked in the lab, bench science, but have I ever actually built something with my hands? And so I found a neighbor,
Okay.
an amazing 80-year-old previous hockey teacher at a high school here. And so I do woodworking with him. So
Oh,
I'll
that's
go every
awesome.
once in a while to his shop, and we'll just build stuff together.
It's
And
outstanding.
I just love that process of, okay, it's in my imagination, this
Right.
table, but let's
Mhm.
now take the steps to build it. That's one thing. And I enjoy just nature, just
Mm,
hiking, walking,
mm.
being outdoors. Anything that could be outdoors, if it can, it will be better than if it were indoors. So I just really enjoy that aspect. And, I think those are the big things right now. Yeah.
I gotta think that the woodworking must give you a tremendous sense of calm because I know this for me personally,
Hmm.
so many things that we work on in our field are never
Hmm.
really done, right? We're
Hmm.
always just kind of taking an idea and iterating more and
Hmm.
iterating more, and you don't reach that done state. But maybe
Yeah.
with a woodworking project, you see a finished product, right?
Hmm.
Where you and
Yeah.
I in our fields maybe never will see a finished product. So
Yeah.
I know I feel that way like when I do something like even as simple as like cut my grass,
Hmm.
where I can at the end of that I can step back and see it all completely cut and even and be like, oh, that's
Hmm.
to me there's
Yeah.
like a tremendous amount of satisfaction
Yeah,
in that,
and
right?
also, yeah, yeah, and also, so working with wood is forgiving. If you
Yeah,
make a hole, it's okay. It's not the
yeah,
end of the world. And I
right.
think, again, going back to entrepreneurship and when we're talking about iterative learning, because that's always a challenge. Everyone wants to have a perfect product before they even go out and talk about it.
Oh
And,
goodness,
our teaching strategy is, even if you don't have it built, just talk about it and make
got to
people
get it out.
excited about it. Get the customers lined up before you actually have the product.
Hmm.
And so that iterative mindset of it's okay if it's imperfect. You can
Right,
always spend time and improve
find
it
more.
later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, yeah, just feeds into it.
So again, speaking of iteration and speaking
Mm-hmm.
of advancement, there's so much happening right now in your field, right? I mean, even
Mm-hmm.
just beyond cancer diagnoses, just precision medicine,
Mm-hmm.
and so much that continues to happen in terms of the future of sort of biomedical
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurship. What do you see right now
Mm-hmm.
coming down the path, Leila, that's really exciting to you in certain terms of innovation?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There are initiatives that are being launched by the White House,
Mm,
nationally, even internationally, to
mm,
support certain areas of need. I think one of the interesting aspects that in the recent years has come more to light is impact investing. So areas that may
sure.
not have, let's say, a large market opportunity, but
Right.
they are in desperate need, and so that's also an area of focus. And I do see more opportunities, and I do see more, maybe it's because of this day and age, community building,
Mm,
meeting people, being in circles, sharing knowledge, finding those peers that you can, bounce ideas back and forth. Those have been exciting.
sure.
But yeah, I mean, we're always also on the look for guidelines because, as you said, just in healthcare, there's so much that happens. So we're always up to date to see what's happening and what's new.
And I guess to that end too, there are um, uh, lots of opportunities for encapsulate within that for sure, right? And
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
mentioned sort of your prospective study and the things that you were
Hmm.
doing. Are there any other roadmap items or advancement things? I mean, I don't know enough about what you're doing, Leila, to know if what you're doing for solid tumors can be
Hmm.
eventually applied to bloodborne, or are there,
Hmm.
where are you
Yeah.
guys thinking you're going to go?
Yeah. So we've, looked at different types of cancer. We've also looked at this to be used as a pharmaceutical drug development tool, where
Mm,
pharma companies, if they're creating new compounds, they can screen their drugs and see how it works against actual patients'
right,
microtumors.
right.
Another indication that we're looking at is, and we recently performed the study, is how do cancer cells behave in space? And so we launched our
Mm.
technology onto the space station. This was a project 3 or 4 years in the
I,
making,
w-
and it
I
happened.
wanted to ask
Yeah.
you about the International Space Station.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we launched last month, and actually it was 2 days ago that we got the samples back. So very
Oh,
fresh.
wow. Very fresh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, very fresh. So yeah, the idea is, how does cancer behave in space? There are some studies that will say, because of the absence of gravity, the cancer cells will grow three-dimensionally and they'll behave more similar to how they would in patients' bodies. And
Mm,
so can we create a platform where we can model the disease better, understand, its response to different drugs or its progression, metastasis. All those are questions that could be further explored. Very, cheesy thing to say, but sky is the limit.
Well, sure. And cancer is just, like the body, the whole idea of the body turning on itself, right? It's just,
Yeah.
it's so hard, I think, to fathom, but yet here it is clearly happening, and it's been something that we've been struggling with as a society and as a human race forever, right?
Yeah.
And certainly making some amazing advancements, but so much work still left to do,
Yeah.
because every cancer is so different.
Yeah.
But it is exciting. So from a chemotherapy treatment perspective, Leila, is it experimenting with the response to all types of chemotherapy, whether they be like intravenous chemotherapy versus
Mhm.
oral chemotherapy? Is that
Yeah.
part of what you guys are looking at too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it could be any chemotherapy that the oncologist usually prescribes for that type of cancer. We
Mm,
can test that. We can also test drugs that are in clinical trials as well.
mm,
And so essentially, it comes down to the oncologist's decision on what they do want to administer. We
sure.
could just provide that information, that additional insight on, for this patient, this drug didn't work. They likely will be resistant to it.
Right. Right. Exciting. Wow. And that's all the promise of precision medicine, right? And sort of the
Yeah.
genetic aspect of like,
Mhm.
you're not going to be predisposed to be responsive to this, so we're not
Yeah.
going to bother with that, right? And we're
Yeah.
going to move
Yeah.
to the thing that is likely going to have the higher
Mhm.
success rate for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating. God,
Right.
that's wonderful. Let's talk for a minute before I let you go about the entrepreneurship hub.
Mhm.
I mentioned that you've got many different hats that you are wearing. One of those hats is you are the director of the Entrepreneurship Hub at the College of Engineering. Let's talk a
Mhm.
little bit about that. Like, what are the goals? What have you been doing with this initiative? How does it maybe differ from what you're kind of doing in the classroom? I'd love to hear more about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. So we talked about this earlier, how technology entrepreneurship is difficult or
Mm,
more challenging compared to, let's say other types of entrepreneurship. And so being in the College of Engineering, we get a lot of ideas that are revolving around technology in some aspect, right? And
mm.
so there's actually this valley of death that most tech startups perhaps will not pass because there's just, in the beginning stages, they need to de-risk the technology even before
Right.
they go out and start working on it. So how can we, in a university setting, when we have access to so many experts in tech and STEM, whether it's faculty or mentors that will come in, alumni, how can we help those ideas, those tech ideas, become de-risked? So essentially, the
Mm,
eHub, as I call it, the Entrepreneurship Hub, is a space in the college that helps for technology-based startups, and that's why
okay.
we're very particular on helping supporting technology-based
Technology. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so one of the programs we do, programs, courses, and events, and one of the programs that I recently was able to get funding for from the National Science Foundation is a program to develop entrepreneurship fellowships for STEM students,
Hmm,
STEM graduate students that can take whatever it is that they're working on and turn that now into, let's say, a viable business idea.
hmm.
And so I'm really excited for that. It's going to start next fall.
That's very
I'm hoping
cool.
to recruit, yeah, a couple of students, and I'm really excited to see how this will go. Again, going back to the idea of empowering with the mindset of problem solvers, empowering them into becoming the next innovators and entrepreneurs.
That's really impressive. And is there a collaboration across other parts of entrepreneurship activity within the university? Like, for example, like the Worth
Mhm.
Institute or the Connecticut Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation?
Yeah.
Do you work in collaboration with them, or how does that all kind of tick and tie together?
Yeah, yeah. I think the great thing about UConn now is that it has so many different programs, and each program is bringing its unique perspective and filling
Sure.
the gap of where is needed. And so we work together. When I was a student, I went through the programs that many
Right.
of these institutes have. So I kind of well, I know them, but also I understand where we can, fill in the gaps of what currently exists.
Mm.
And yeah, I work with them. I mentor at CCI. I'm a mentor at
Nice.
IQ. It's another program out of the School of Business. And I
Okay.
think we need that also at the program level, because that's what
Sure.
students see. For them, it's like, oh, okay, this professor is telling me to go to CCI's program, so I need to follow through on there. And, from there, I'll get students. And so it works in, a two-way
Yeah.
working relationship.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So Layla, for you personally, you've got so much that you're doing right now, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and what you're trying to accomplish. And let's pretend we're the Layla of 10 years from now. It's now, instead of 2024, it's 2034.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you? What are you doing?
No, that's a great question. I hope to be able to make more of an impact on the global scale. I'll just put this
Mm,
out there. Maybe we'll manifest it.
yeah,
And
let's do it.
also, I'd like to have more of an impact specifically on, women's education, girls' education.
Oh, interesting.
That's something
Yeah.
that's really important to me. I really like to promote that. And
Is
hopefully we
that
can make
something you
advancements
want to
in,
see through scholarships, or you want to see through just more women getting
yeah.
opportunities for education that maybe aren't coming from this country? Or do you
Mhm.
have do you have a vision for that yet, Leila?
I would just like to help more youth get
Mm,
involved in having access to opportunities that they may themselves not see that it's possible. And
I see.
so I don't have the specifics yet, whether it's a scholarship or if it's through the university or how that would be, but that's just
Sure.
an area that
I
is,
like it.
on my mind, and I'll find a way to,
You will.
make that happen. Yeah,
You will.
yeah, we're manifesting today.
Yes, and
Yeah,
you will inspire a whole nother generation of female entrepreneurs. I know it, especially in
yeah.
the hard sciences where you are, which is just so difficult. I think just to get what you're doing, like we talked about at the beginning, right? There's so much that you're trying to do just to get your science proven and
Mm-hmm.
effective, and then build an entire business around that, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's
yeah.
just so much to do. Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you. Awesome.
yeah,
Well,
of course.
Leila
Thank you.
Daneshmandi, thank you for your time. Thank you for telling us your story, your journey, encapsulate all the work that you're doing around supporting the next generation of entrepreneurs. And we wish you the best of luck. And we're excited to watch Encapsulate continue to solve really hard problems in cancer therapy and precision medicine. So thanks again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Oh, thank you for having me, and it's been wonderful spending time with you today.
Awesome. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, bye.